Hello, this is the Introduction to the Research Questions, Hypothesis, and Probability Normal Curve module. Now there are two chapters that we're dealing with this week, which is more than we have been, but some of the content I think you're going to find is familiar to you. So the Research Questions Hypothesis chapter borrows a lot of the same content that was in Creswell. And the Probability and Normal Curve chapter is going to get into some concepts that we've already been discussing related to effect size. And so even though there's two chapters, I think you're going to have a little bit more background knowledge on these chapters, and so we'll be able to do two in 1 week. All right, so the usual stuff, homework and mastery quizzes from the SOL kind. And I am asking you to add more to your research question mapping. So far, I think most people have got a research question, and I've identified independent and dependent variables. Some folks have got sampling, and some folks have got list of other variables. But we're going to work this week specifically on the page of the template that talks about independent, dependent variables and the ones in the middle. Those ones in the middle that are extraneous variables that might be an alternative cause or a confounding variable, something that systematically undermines the validity of the experiment. Or they could be variables that potentially might be ones that would upset the experiment, but that don't upset the experiment because they've been controlled for, right? So I understand that that is a whole new concept that we're dealing with. And so that particular page of the template is difficult, yet it's probably the most critical one too, because it's where you think about the quality of the design that you've got. And so because of that, because it's both challenging and critical, I've got a little exercise that we're going to work on together, kind of a whole class deal, to get at the concept. And so I've got two articles that I'm asking you to read portions of. And I'm going to emphasize that in a minute, what I mean by portions, in order to answer certain questions, very similar kinds of questions that are in your template about those two articles. And by doing so, I hope it will uncover the kind of things that I'm looking for you to do in your research map, right? Where you're going to do your work is on this shared Google Doc. This is set up so that the sharing is for everybody and everybody can edit it. And I basically got elements that are very familiar from the template for each of the two articles. The cooperative learning article, I think, has 3 research questions. They're not stated as research questions directly, so there might be some room for interpretation of how you write those. Then I ask you for the research methodology with the Macmillan chart, and I'll show you that in a second. Sampling, assignment to groups, independent, dependent variables, and then this is the key thing here. Other variables, and I want you to add an explanation when you identify a variable. So in other words, you're going to put in a variable like prior knowledge and add an explanation about it. Is it being controlled, measured by the researcher, somehow taken accounted of, so that they're equalized between the two groups, and that extraneous variable is not upsetting the possible conclusions of the article? Or even more important, other variables that are explicitly in the study, but that could be an alternative explanation. The more of these that you've got possible in a study, especially the more important they are, that are uncontrolled for, unmeasured, but possibly an alternative explanation, the poorer the quality of the study. Right? And then the statistical test used in the study, see Salkind chart. So Salkind chart and Macmillan chart. I've got those in a PDF, I guess it is, in the module. So when I say research design, this is what I'm referring to. And of course, these are both quantitative studies because this is a stats class, or actually the accelerated reader. They both may have some qualitative aspects to it, but they do have quantitative aspects as well. So for the quantitative portion of it, are we talking about non-experimental or experimental studies? If we're talking about experimental studies, are they true experiments which means random assignment to groups, or quasi-experiments, which means intact groups, or single subject designs, where they're only looking at one person at a time and giving them the intervention, taking it away. Non-experimental correlational studies, which we've been discussing correlational statistics and studies that use those kind of statistics, are generally correlational. Comparative studies are studies that are like experiments, but they don't have research or intervention. They're just studying a naturally occurring experiment. Or descriptive studies. No hypothesis, just describing a situation. All right, so you're going to use this to identify the type of experiment, or maybe I'm giving something away, the type of design. Now, Figure 9.1 is something that we're going to get into more in a couple weeks, and then we're going to use it for the rest of the semester. It's a good organizer for types of statistics. And it also kind of goes along with the, kind of use these both mentally as you're thinking about how to categorize things. But in terms of statistics, the way this is meant to be used is you've got a research problem and you start using this flowchart to figure out what kind of statistic you should use. And you could get much more complex with this flowchart because there's many more statistics possible than are shown here. But this week, I'm going to do it a little backwards. We haven't learned about these statistics yet, and we're not at the place where we can try to figure it out ourselves yet. But in these articles, the stats that are used are identified. So in the case of the cooperative learning article, for example, I think you'll see that they use an ANOVA. And that's another name for analysis of variance or simple analysis of variance. So what I want you to do, obviously now I've told you the answer, but look back through this chart and see if it makes sense, that selection of a statistic based on this chart. And likewise for the accelerated reader. All right. Now, this is open, so I'm hoping that we come up with robust answers for both. One starts on one page and the other starts on the next page. And so what I want you to do, each of you, is to add a little bit to both the cooperative learning study chart and to the accelerated reader chart, but template. But don't add so much that other people won't have anything left to add, right? So those of you who like to start early, especially, you got to hold back and not do too much, but of course, do your share. And I guess we'll all figure out together what that means. If you want to change or comment on what somebody else has already added, you can do that too using the comment features of Google Doc. Right. And hopefully, I want you to check in on this chart even if you start early, or even if you don't start early, check in and see what's going on. So that the point of this is that on Sunday when we're together, we can have a good discussion about the two articles, which is better and why, and how thinking like this can help inform you when you do your own research map.